When the wedding invitation came in the mail, I thought it was a mistake. The envelope had our home address, but only my name written in neat, careful handwriting. Inside, there was a cream-colored card, embossed with gold letters that shimmered under the kitchen light. It read, "You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Mr. Daniel H. Crawford and Miss Elena Marie Torres. Daniel, my husband." For a moment, I just stared at it. The words floating, almost unreal. I remember the faint smell of detergent from the towel I was folding, the hum of the refrigerator, and then the sudden weight that pressed against my chest, so heavy it almost made me drop the card. I reread the name again and again, my eyes tracing the loops of the calligraphy, hoping I'd misread it. That maybe it was another Daniel Crawford, some stranger with the same name, but the date matched perfectly. The same week, Daniel was supposed to be on a business trip in Seattle, and beneath the date, in smaller font, "Private ceremony. Invitations are personal and non-transferable." I laughed, a hollow, breathless sound that startled even me. That's how it began, with a wedding invitation to my own husband's secret marriage. 2 months earlier, life had been ordinary, comfortable even. I'd been married to Daniel for 8 years. We met in college. He was charming, the kind of man who could make anyone laugh. I was quiet, practical, the listener. We built a modest life together, a little 2-story house in Maplewood, a golden retriever named Buddy, dinners with candlelight on Fridays. We didn't have children, though not for lack of trying. 2 miscarriages had left me both fragile and fiercely protective of the small piece we'd rebuilt. Daniel was patient, or so I thought. He'd hold me when I cried, saying, "It's okay, Liv. We have time." We always have time, I believed him. He worked as a project consultant. Lots of travel, lots of client dinners. I used to pack his shirts neatly, tucking a little note in the pocket sometimes. Just a simple, "Miss you already." He'd smile when he found them. Or at least he used to. Then one morning, over coffee, he mentioned the Seattle trip. "Big client, could be a game changer," he said, stirring sugar into his cup. "I might be gone a few weeks." I remember how casually he said it, like it was nothing. 3 weeks? I asked, surprised. "Maybe 4, he replied. "You know how these things go." He smiled that easy, confident smile, and I smiled back, though something in his tone, a flicker of hesitation, lingered with me long after he left for the airport. The house felt quieter without him. I filled the time with work, cleaning, cooking meals for one. Buddy slept near the door, waiting for Daniel like he always did. At night, I'd lie awake scrolling through my phone, rereading his last messages. "Daniel, landed safe, exhausted but fine. Love you me. Love you too. Get some rest." The days went by, then weeks. His calls became less frequent, always short, always rushed. "Sorry, Liv, back-to-back meetings. I'll call you tomorrow, promise." But tomorrow didn't always come. The first time I felt that cold pinch of unease was when I saw a picture on a mutual friend's Instagram. It was a blurry shot of a group dinner, tagged location, Los Angeles, not Seattle. Daniel wasn't tagged, but there he was, unmistakably. The curve of his smile, the cufflinks I'd given him for our anniversary. I told myself it must be an old photo. Maybe they'd just uploaded it late. But the timestamp read yesterday. I wanted to call him, demand an explanation. But instead I texted, "Hey, how's Seattle?" He replied an hour later, "Rainy as ever." "Miss you, Rainy." Los Angeles hadn't seen rain in weeks. I told myself not to overthink, but deep down, a small voice whispered, "Something's not right." 2 weeks later, I got a call from his assistant. "Hi, Olivia. Just checking in about the conference next week. Do you still need a ticket for the gala dinner?" I froze. "Conference? What conference?" "Oh," she said, sounding confused. "Daniel mentioned you might fly out to join him." "The corporate retreat in Santa Barbara?" "Santa Barbara." I hung up politely, my hands shaking. Seattle, Los Angeles, now Santa Barbara. That night, I opened our shared laptop. Daniel was careless sometimes. He'd leave tabs open or forget to clear his emails. I wasn't proud of it, but curiosity had long turned to fear. In his sent folder, I found an itinerary, a hotel reservation at the Marina Grand, Santa Barbara. 2 guests, under special request, roses and champagne on arrival. My stomach dropped. The next morning, I confronted him over the phone. "I thought you were in Seattle," I said quietly. "I am," he replied too quickly. "Funny," I said, "because your assistant mentioned Santa Barbara." There was a pause, the kind that hums like static. "She must be mistaken," he said finally. "You know how she mixes things up." That night, he didn't call back. Then came the envelope. When I saw his name printed next to another woman's, everything clicked. The distance, the lies, the sudden hush around his schedule. I felt my knees give way as I sat on the kitchen floor, the invitation trembling in my hands. I read it again. Daniel H. Crawford and Elena Marie Torres. Elena. The name sounded faintly familiar. And then I remembered. She was the business partner he'd once mentioned months ago, a marketing consultant from Los Angeles. They'd met at a conference, he'd said. She was sharp, no nonsense, and funny. I thought nothing of it then. But now, every casual mention, every late-night client call, replayed in my mind like cruel echoes. My husband hadn't just betrayed me, he was marrying her, and I was invited to watch. That night, I sat in our bedroom, the invitation on the dresser beside our wedding photo, Daniel's arm around me, both of us laughing at something the photographer said. I remember how the sunlight had fallen across his face that day. I reached out and turned the frame face down. My phone buzzed then. A message from Daniel. "Daniel. Hey, Liv. Just wanted to check in. I might be out of service for a bit. Don't worry if I can't call." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. I didn't reply. I just whispered to the empty room, "Don't worry, Daniel. I won't." For the next few days, I moved through life like a ghost. I went to work, fed Buddy, folded laundry, all the little motions that made up my days. But it all felt like watching someone else's life through glass. Every now and then, I'd glance at that invitation sitting on the counter, its gold edges catching the light. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was proof that I wasn't imagining things, that the man I'd trusted for nearly a decade was leading another life behind my back. But I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I wanted to know the whole truth, not just fragments and suspicions. So I started with Elena. I remembered her name from a company dinner Daniel had dragged me to about a year earlier. She'd been there, tall, confident, the kind of woman who seemed to fill the room without even trying. I'd shaken her hand. She'd smiled warmly, said, "So nice to finally meet Daniel's wife." At the time, I'd thought she meant it. I typed her name into the search bar, Elena Marie Torres. A few professional results came up, LinkedIn, business conferences, a podcast interview, nothing scandalous. But then, buried in a local lifestyle blog, I found a photo. Elena in a flowing white dress standing next to a man whose face was turned away. But I didn't need to see it. The broad shoulders, the familiar wristwatch, it was Daniel. The caption read, "Private Engagement Celebration, Santa Barbara." My throat tightened. I clicked on the photo, zooming in until the pixels blurred. I could see his hand on her waist, his smile, the same one he'd once saved just for me. I felt something inside me go still. It wasn't even anger yet, just a cold, hollow clarity. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying our last conversation before his trip. He'd kissed my forehead, told me to take care of myself, and said, "When I get back, we'll plan that vacation, okay? Just us. Just us." The words echoed in my head, cruel and absurd. At 2 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table staring at my laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore. Maybe confirmation that this wasn't real, but every click, Every photo, every mention of Daniel and Elena just tightened the knot in my chest. By morning, I had a plan. If he could lie so easily, then I needed to see for myself what kind of life he was building without me. The invitation listed a venue, the Ivy Coast Resort, a seaside hotel just outside Santa Barbara. I called and pretended to be one of the wedding coordinators, asking about logistics. The woman on the phone said cheerfully, "Oh yes, the Crawford Torres wedding. Saturday at 5 p.m. Private ceremony, about 50 guests." Hearing my last name paired with hers made my stomach twist. Crawford Torres. It was real. I thanked her and hung up, then sat there for a long moment, my hands shaking so hard I had to set the phone down. I wasn't sure why I needed to go. Maybe to face it, maybe to make it undeniable, or maybe because a small part of me still didn't believe he could really do it. On Friday night, I packed a small bag, just clothes, my wallet, and the invitation, the one he never expected me to receive. I told no one where I was going. When I arrived at the Ivy Coast Resort the next afternoon, the air smelled like salt and gardenias. The waves crashed softly beyond a manicured hedge, and white tents shimmered in the distance. Guests were beginning to arrive, dressed in pastels and linen. I stayed in the parking lot for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed to drive away, to leave this nightmare behind. But something stronger kept me there. I needed to see him. I walked slowly toward the main courtyard, blending in among the arriving guests. The sound of a string quartet floated through the air. A woman in a headset was arranging chairs, and waiters passed champagne flutes to laughing couples. Then I saw him. Daniel stood at the altar talking to the officiant. He looked calm, confident. The same steady posture that used to make me feel safe. His suit was the same shade of gray he wore to our wedding. And then she appeared. Elena. She wore a white silk gown that caught the light like water, her dark hair pinned with pearls. She was radiant, and I hated that she was radiant. I hated that she looked so certain, so sure of her place beside him. My heart hammered in my chest as I stood behind a column, watching the man I loved prepare to marry someone else. The officiant began to speak, his voice carrying over the courtyard. Today we celebrate the union of two souls who found love through trust and partnership. Trust. I almost laughed. My hands trembled, but I stayed frozen, barely breathing. The guests smiled, phones lifted, flashes blinking. Daniel turned toward Elena, his expression soft. And then, as if some cruel twist of fate wanted to make sure I understood, his eyes flickered across the crowd and landed on me. For a second, he went completely still. I watched the color drain from his face, his jaw tightening, his lips parting slightly in disbelief. The officiant's voice faded behind the rush of blood in my ears. Daniel blinked once, twice, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. And I just stood there, clutching the invitation against my chest, tears burning behind my eyes. He knew, I knew, and there was no way out of it now. The ceremony stumbled to a halt. Whispered confusion rippled through the guests. I turned and walked away before he could come after me. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just walked. Slow, deliberate steps down the garden path, my heels clicking against the stone. Behind me, I heard his voice. "Olivia, wait." But I didn't turn back. Not until I reached the edge of the parking lot did I finally stop. I could hear him coming up behind me, breath uneven, voice hoarse. "Liv, what are you doing here?" I turned then, meeting his eyes. "I got your invitation," I said quietly. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, I saw fear in him. Not guilt, not shame, but fear. "Liv, it's not what you think," he started, but I held up a hand. "Then what is it, Daniel?" My voice was trembling, but steady enough. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband just married someone else." He rubbed his face, glancing back toward the courtyard where music had stopped completely. Guests were whispering. Someone was filming. "Please," he said softly, Can we talk somewhere private? I took a breath, feeling the salt air sting my lungs. Sure, I said. Let's go talk. But this time, you're going to tell me everything. We found a quiet spot near the edge of the resort, a narrow garden path that curved behind the reception hall. The sounds of laughter and music were fading, replaced by the restless wind coming off the ocean. Daniel kept glancing over his shoulder as if he half expected someone to follow. His tie was crooked now, his hands fidgeting with the ring that wasn't there. Our ring. The one he'd stopped wearing a few months back, claiming it was too tight. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt like a wall built from all the lies he'd told. Finally, I said, "Start talking." He swallowed hard. "Liv, listen. This isn't what you think. The ceremony, it's not legally binding. It's not legally binding?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "You're standing at an altar with another woman and that's your defense." He flinched, looked down at the ground. "It's complicated." I laughed bitterly. "It always is, isn't it?" "Go ahead, Daniel. Explain to me how you accidentally proposed to your business partner and invited your wife to watch." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting everywhere but me. "It started as a partnership, Liv. Strictly business. Elena and I, we were working on a client pitch. Her company wanted a joint venture and things blurred. She was going through a divorce. I was under pressure. I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" My voice cracked. "You call flying across the country and staging a wedding a mistake?" He looked at me then, and I could see the panic in his eyes. I didn't know she'd actually go through with it. The ceremony was supposed to be symbolic, part of the brand launch, a publicity stunt, Liv. "A publicity stunt," I echoed softly. "So you weren't marrying her, just pretending to?" He nodded quickly as though the words could make it all go away. "Yes, exactly. It's all marketing, nothing real." I stared at him for a long moment, then asked quietly, "So, which part of that publicity stunt required you to lie to me for months?" He opened his mouth, then shut it again. "Which part?" I continued, my voice steady now. "Made you buy her roses, book hotel rooms under fake names, and tell me you were in Seattle when you were in Los Angeles with her?" He winced. "I was going to tell you when," I snapped. "After the honeymoon?" I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that alone at home. What I felt now was something sharper. Not rage, not sadness, but a clarity that burned through everything else. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Liv, I didn't want to hurt you. You've been through so much with the miscarriages." And I thought, "Don't," I cut in sharply. "Don't you dare use that as an excuse. My grief isn't your permission slip to betray me." He froze, guilt flashing across his face. For a moment, we just stood there, the wind tugging at the edges of his jacket, the sound of waves crashing somewhere far below. Then I said, "You know what's funny? I believed in you more than I believed in myself. Every time someone warned me you traveled too much, that you were too secretive, I defended you. I told them, 'Daniel's not like that.' I thought we were partners." "Liv, we were," he whispered. "No," I said quietly. "We were an illusion." He took a step closer. "Please, let's just go home and talk. We can fix this, fix." I let out a hollow laugh. "Daniel, you built a life with another woman while still wearing my name. You let her believe she was your future while I was waiting at home, cooking dinner for a man who didn't exist anymore." His eyes glistened. "I never stopped loving you." I looked at him. Really looked. At the familiar curve of his face, the lines that had deepened around his eyes, the mouth that once whispered promises against my skin. "Maybe that's the worst part," I said softly, "that you can still say that and believe it means something." He reached out, trying to take my hand, but I pulled back. "Don't." The air between us was thick with everything unspoken. Then he said, "Please, Liv. Just don't ruin this. The press is here, investors. If this goes public, I could lose everything." I blinked. You're worried about your reputation?" He didn't answer, and in that silence, something inside me finally snapped. Not with noise or anger, but with quiet certainty. "Then I guess it's time someone knows who you really are," I said. Before he could stop me, I turned and walked back toward the courtyard. My pulse pounded, my heart both terrified and strangely calm. Guests were murmuring, craning their necks to see what was happening. Elena stood near the altar, confusion painted across her face. When she saw me approach, she frowned. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady though my chest ached. "You can start by asking your groom why he forgot to tell you he already has a wife." The crowd went silent. You could almost hear the sea stop moving. Elena blinked, looking from me to Daniel, then back again. "What is she talking about?" Daniel tried to speak, but I didn't let him. I reached into my bag, pulled out the invitation, and held it up. "He sent me this," I said, "a wedding invitation to this very event." That's how I found out. Gasps rippled through the guests. Phones were raised, cameras clicked. Daniel's face went pale. "Liv, please stop." But I didn't. Not this time. "You can tell them, Daniel," I said, voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell them how you've been living two lives. Tell her what you told me about this being a business trip." Elena's expression hardened. "Is this true?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence said everything. Elena stepped back, her face draining of color. "You told me you were divorced." I was going to," he stammered. She shook her head, eyes flashing. "You lied to me." To both of us, I felt tears sting the back of my eyes, but I held them in. Not out of pride, but because I needed to stay clear long enough to walk away. I turned to leave, but before I did, I said quietly, "You wanted to know what it feels like to be married to two people, Daniel. Now you'll find out what it's like to be left by both." And then I walked out, past the guests, past the murmurs, past the cameras, until the sound of the ocean drowned it all out. I drove for hours, barely aware of the road. The sun dipped low, painting the sky with orange and violet streaks. When I finally pulled into a small roadside motel, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd packed Daniel's suitcase 4 weeks ago. She was quieter, stronger, tired, but unbroken. I whispered to her, "You're free now." And for the first time in years, I almost believed it. There it was. A video uploaded to a local gossip page. "Bride exposes groom's double life during wedding." The thumbnail showed me standing there in that navy dress, holding the microphone. For a long minute, I hovered my thumb over the play button. Then I pressed it. The shaky video began mid-sentence, my voice trembling but clear. "And I wish you both nothing but honesty, because clearly that's something Daniel doesn't know how to give." Gasps echoed in the background, the bride's bouquet dropping to the floor, and then the footage cut out. I stared at the screen until my reflection blurred against it. Tired eyes, puffy from crying, a face I barely recognized. The comment section was chaos. Strangers calling me brave, others calling me cruel. Some even joked about Daniel's business expansion. It hurt, but not in the way it used to. This pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was steady, familiar. Like the dull ache of a scar you've finally accepted will never fade completely. I closed the app and put my phone face down again. For the first time in weeks, I felt something that wasn't heartbreak. It was peace. 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just the sound of tires crunching on the driveway and a car door slamming shut. I didn't move. I watched through the living room window as he stood on the porch, soaked in sweat and shame. He looked smaller somehow, deflated. He knocked once, twice. "Olivia," he said, his voice muffled through the door. "Please, just talk to me." I opened it, but only halfway. "What do you want?" He swallowed hard. His eyes darted from me to the floor, to the ring still on my finger. I didn't mean for things to happen like this. A bitter laugh escaped me. Like what, Daniel? Like marrying someone while you were still my husband? He flinched. It wasn't supposed to be real. It started as a business arrangement. Lila, she invested in my company and then you decided she was worth more than the vows you made to me? I interrupted. His silence said everything. He looked at me with tears pooling in his eyes. I made a mistake. I thought you'd never find out that part. I thought you'd never find out. Cut deeper than anything else. Because in his mind, the betrayal wasn't the problem. Getting caught was. I did find out, I said quietly, and you made sure the whole world did too. He stepped closer, desperate now. Please, Liv, I can fix this. I'll annul it. I shook my head. You can't fix something that's already been burned down, Daniel. You can only stop standing in the ashes. For a second, he looked like he wanted to argue, but then he saw my face, really saw it, and something in him broke. He turned away without another word, walking back to his car. The engine started, then faded down the street. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling until my hands stopped shaking. And then, for the first time in months, I felt free. Weeks passed. I went back to work, started eating better, sleeping through the night. I even joined a small book club downtown, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Each Thursday evening, I sat in a circle of women who didn't know my story, who didn't see me as the wife from that video. They just saw me. A woman who loved stories and tea and quiet laughter. One night after the meeting, a woman named Maria lingered behind. You know, she said, you have this calm about you. Like you've survived something heavy and decided not to let it harden you. I smiled softly. Maybe that's exactly what happened. She nodded. Good. Because that kind of peace is rare, and it's beautiful. I drove home that night with the windows down, the air cool and clean. I realized I didn't think about Daniel anymore, not in the way I used to. He was a chapter, not the story. A few months later, I received a small envelope in the mail. It was from Daniel's mother, someone I hadn't spoken to since everything happened. Inside was a handwritten note. Olivia, I don't expect forgiveness for my son, but I wanted you to know he's left the other woman. He's moved out of state. I think he's finally realizing what he lost. I'm sorry for everything. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not out of longing, but closure. Some part of me still wished him peace. Not out of love, but because holding on to hate felt too heavy to carry. That weekend, I took off my wedding ring. Not dramatically, not with tears, just quietly while doing the dishes. The soap made it slip off easily. I placed it in a small box and set it aside. The indentation on my finger lingered for a while, pale against my skin. But over time, even that faded, because I finally understood something. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't exposing someone. It's healing in plain sight, becoming happy again when they expected you to crumble. 3 months after I took off the ring, I was invited to a charity dinner hosted by my company. It was one of those formal events I used to dread. Long speeches, forced laughter, too many glasses of wine. But that night, I went with my head held high. I wore a deep green dress, nothing flashy, just elegant, the kind of color that made me feel grounded, alive. When I arrived, the room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a shadow of myself. I was present. I was me. Halfway through the evening, as I was chatting with a colleague, I noticed someone staring at me from across the room. A tall man, maybe in his 40s, kind eyes, quiet smile. He didn't look away when I met his gaze, just raised his glass slightly, like a silent hello. Something fluttered inside me. Not romance, not yet, just possibility. We talked later that evening. about travel, about books, about how neither of us liked small talk. His name was Aaron. He was kind without being pitying, funny without trying too hard, and when he asked for my number, I didn't feel fear. I felt calm. Not everything had to lead to love. Sometimes it just led to living again. A few weeks after that dinner, I found myself back in the same cafe where Daniel and I used to meet before his business trips. The owner, Mrs. Chang, greeted me with a warm smile. "Long time no see, Olivia. Your usual?" I smiled. "Yes, please." And add one of those blueberry muffins. As I waited, I noticed two women at a nearby table whispering, their phones angled slightly toward me. At first, that old instinct, shame, pricked at the back of my mind, but it faded quickly, because I realized something. I had survived their whispers. Their judgment hadn't broken me. When Mrs. Chang handed me my coffee, she said quietly, "You know, I saw that video. You were brave." I met her eyes. "I was hurt," I said softly, "but sometimes bravery looks like not letting the hurt define you." She nodded. "That's true." "And look at you now," I smiled. "Yeah, look at me now." Not long after, Daniel reached out again, this time by email. A simple subject line: apology. "Liv, you were right. I was selfish. Lila's gone. She left when she found out I wasn't divorced. I've lost everything. My company, my reputation, even my family barely speaks to me now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know. I see it now. What I did. What I destroyed. I hope you found peace. You deserve it. Daniel." I stared at the screen for a long time. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just felt done. I typed one sentence in reply. I already found it. Then I hit send, closed my laptop, and stepped outside. The world felt wider that day, as if life itself had been waiting for me to unclench my fists and finally let it back in. Spring came early that year. The hydrangeas bloomed again, softer this time, like forgiveness in color. I spent mornings gardening, afternoons writing, and evenings watching the sun fade behind the trees. Sometimes I'd catch myself humming while washing dishes or laughing at nothing. The kind of laughter that comes when you realize the storm has passed and you're still standing. One Sunday afternoon, Leah came over with her kids. We sat on the porch while the children played in the yard. She looked at me and smiled. "You look happy." I laughed. "That's because I am." Not everyone comes out of something like that smiling, you know. I didn't. For a long time, I admitted. But I realized healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about deciding it doesn't get to control what happens next. Leah nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds like something Auntie May would say." I smiled at that because it did. Later that night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the light fade into the horizon. The wind carried the faint scent of rain again, just like that morning in the motel. Except now I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. I thought about all the women who'd written to me after that video went viral. Strangers who said my story gave them courage to leave their own broken marriages. At first, I hadn't known what to say, but now I did. Because maybe my story wasn't just about betrayal. Maybe it was about becoming whole again. I reached for my journal, the one I'd started keeping after therapy, and wrote a single line at the top of the page. He lied. He married another, but I found myself. I closed it gently, smiling through the quiet. Sometimes, life doesn't give you the ending you expected, but it gives you the one you needed. When I look back on everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, I don't see a woman who was destroyed. I see a woman who was remade. Sometimes life takes everything you thought was certain and shatters it in front of you. Your home, your trust, your marriage, gone in one cruel twist of fate. And in that moment, it feels like there's nothing left worth saving. But here's what I learned. You can survive the unthinkable. You can rebuild from the ruins. And one day you'll wake up and realize that the person who hurt you isn't the ending of your story. They were just the turning point. I thought Daniel's betrayal defined me. I thought his secret wedding meant I was unlovable, unwanted, unworthy. But I was wrong. His choices only revealed who he truly was and who I could become without him. It took me time to forgive, not him, but myself, for ignoring the signs, for loving too long, for staying quiet when my heart was screaming. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back in. It means letting yourself move on. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been lied to, betrayed, or made to feel small, I hope you know this. You are not the broken thing they left behind. You are the survivor of their storm. You will smile again. You will love again. And when you do, it will be from a place of strength, not need. I used to think closure came from answers, from hearing why they did it. Now I know closure comes when you no longer need the answer. So that's my story about the husband who invited me to his own secret wedding and how I walked away from that nightmare stronger than I ever imagined. Tell me, if you were in my place, standing in that church, microphone in hand, would you have exposed the truth like I did? Or would you have walked away quietly? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for being part of my story. Until next time, take care of your heart, because sometimes that's the only thing worth protecting.